All right. Let's get started. In Hebrews chapter 12, it says this: "Therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the source and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Lay aside all that hinders and run with endurance with our eyes on God, on Jesus, on his kingdom, on the eternal. See, at the heart of relationship is the eternal perspective. We need to be people who have our eyes on the kingdom of God, on the throne of God. That's first. I talked about this last week, right? We need to be people of direction. We need to be people who are running towards God. When we get into a relationship, we have this bad habit of kind of turning away from everything else in life and only focusing on the relationship. But when we do that, we end up taking our eyes off of God, off of the eternal, off of the kingdom. And that's wrong. We need to be people who are heading in the direction of the kingdom together, running side by side. So it's in that context that we jump into tonight's message. It's that context that we need to keep in mind for all of our relationship messages, right? Because every relationship has to be grounded first. It doesn't have to be. Every relationship should be grounded first in the eternal, in what you're pursuing. With that mindset of the eternal, I made this statement last week that I don't know if it upset anybody, but it's upset people in the past when I've said it. And it's, all relationships end. Now, last week I said it as all dating relationships end. But technically, all relationships end eventually. Even marriage. In fact, the point of marriage is that it ends when death parts the couple. That's in the vows, right? Until death do us part. Okay? So every relationship comes to an end. And after that relationship ends, and the person or the people in that relationship are standing in the presence of God and facing the judgment of God, can each person in that relationship say, here's the person, God, that I ran side by side with towards your kingdom. They became a better person, and I supported them in their growth and their journey as a Christian during our time together. Here they are. You can present them confidently to God. Or would you rather, or would it end up being in your relationships that you would say, yeah, I knew this person, or we were really, really close. I was married to them, or I dated them, or whatever. But I guess in our relationship, we actually kind of ignored the kingdom, or we kind of actually forgot about you, God, in that relationship. See what I mean by having an eye on the eternal? I said it last week in the phrase, if you stand in the throne room of God, are you ashamed of your relationship? And this can apply to all of our relationships. We're running together the race laid out before us, setting aside hindrances and running with endurance. And we're to do that as a community, running side by side. Can you say that we're doing that? When we come into the throne room of God, when we come to his judgment seat, can we say that we supported one another, that we ran well together? That in the time that we were in relationship and community together, that we grew closer to God? It's an important question. All relationships will come to an end, and all dating relationships especially, all of them end. Either in marriage or breakup, or some other way, but generally marriage or breakup. So all dating relationships end. So, if we know they're going to end, and we know that one day we're going to have to meet with God about this, it's a really good idea to think well about our relationships and how they're going to end. Not the how in terms of what's going to happen to a person, or but the how in terms of, is that ending going to be a good thing, a good ending, or a bad ending? Will we end in a way that both people walk away having grown and matured? Or are we going to walk away in that relationship, or have that relationship end in a way that's devastating or destructive? We need to plan our relationships for good endings and operate within our relationship with a good ending in mind. Does that make sense? Okay. Feel free to ask questions if I lose you here anywhere, okay? That's totally fine. So, we want to set ourselves up to have good endings. And we want to start setting up relationships to have good endings right from the beginning of the relationship. If you wait until the relationship is ending to try to make it okay, it's not going to be okay, right? If you're dating someone, for example, okay, because dating's really common for you guys at this age, okay? If you're dating someone and you realize, you know what, this relationship isn't really going very well, I think I need to end it. And you're like, how do I end it well? If you're thinking at that point for the first time about how to end it well, you've missed your chance. It's not going to end well, probably. In my experience, it doesn't end well that way. I have been in 14 dating relationships when I was your guys' age, and I watched many others of my friends and other people go through dating relationships. Well, friends. I didn't really have friends, but I had some friends. People I hung out with, they put up with me now and then. And I watched a lot of relationships end, and pretty much none of them end well unless the couple planned in advance to have a healthy, safe relationship that could actually end well in a healthy way. Most of us don't think of it until it's too late. So that's tonight's purpose. That's our goal. I want to set you guys up with a plan or with some ideas of how to set up your relationship to be a healthy relationship while it's happening, and for when it ends, that it ends well. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir. So the way we do this, that I suggest we do this, is by using something I call boundaries. Now, boundaries is a bit of a weird word, because when I say boundaries, you probably think of like something that stops you, hinders you, gets in your way, blocks your access. And that's not quite what I mean by boundaries. Not quite. Sometimes boundaries block us, and in this case they kind of block us in a certain way, but not quite what I mean by it. I have kind of two analogies I use for this. One of them I use is a racetrack. Okay? A racetrack is a set sort of race, as it were, right? And we're to run a race that's laid out before us, so this works well. But a racetrack isn't just a big open space and they say run wherever you want and you'll end up at the finish probably, maybe. There's boundaries, right? There's a set course. Unlike car racetracks, on the corners especially, there's barricades and boundaries to keep the cars ideally on the course, right? Sometimes they go off, right, Katie? All right. But, generally, the point is to stay on the course. And the course is marked by these boundaries. They mark the direction that the racers have to go, right? So that's kind of what I mean by boundaries. I don't necessarily mean walls up in the way of your relationship or in your life, but I mean more like guidelines or boundaries that mark the path you're walking on. There's this biblical picture of a path, right? There's a narrow way and a wide way, right? And the narrow way is the way to heaven. We want to be walking on a path that's a little narrower, but it's well defined. We've got boundaries that outline where that path goes and how it operates. So that's kind of what I mean by boundaries. Another example or analogy we might use is fire. Why do you light a fire? What's the purpose of lighting a fire?
Keep warm.
Sorry?
Keep warm.
Keep warm. Cook food. Light. Heat. For fun. Arson. If Holly was here, that would have been yelled out immediately, and I'm kind of glad it didn't. But I mean, we still got to enjoy it in the group, right? Arson. Okay. No, but fire. Generally, the purpose of fire is heat, light, warmth, food. Right? In early human civilizations, fire was life. And fire is life when it is held in its correct sort of purpose and contained. But what happens if a fire isn't contained? Arson. Or worse, right? I mean, ask the people of Fort McMurray a couple years ago. What happens when a fire gets out of containment? Ask Philemon, one of our volunteer firefighters for our community. What happens when a fire gets out of containment? Earlier this year, when a fire got out of containment and Ian had to rip over with his tractor and cut the field around the fire to try to stop it from spreading too far. Tried to contain it again, right? Put up new boundaries. for the fire to try to stop its expanse and its spread. So fire is this thing of life and light and heat and warmth. It's a good thing when it's contained correctly and held in its right way and right place. But if let just go free, it becomes a thing of destruction. In a similar way, our relationships can do that. They can start off in this containment, but if they're not given proper form and boundaries to hold the relationship or hold that fire in place, it can kind of go wild and be just quite destructive. So that's what I mean by boundaries. Boundaries aren't necessarily there to stop you or hinder you or mess up your fun. They're there to protect you. They're there to keep your relationship going in a healthy way, and they're designed so that when your relationship ends, it ends really well. You're not walking out of that with a ton of regrets or pain. There will be some heartache. Sorry?
Or a burned down forest.
Or a burned down forest of your life. Because it's an analogy. Right. Or a literal burned down forest, because why not? Yeah. She broke up with me. You're done, Forrest! Just imagine. Some of us don't respond well to heartbreak. We just arson.
We just arson.
So let's go into some boundaries. We want to make sure that these boundaries are designed to keep us focused on our purpose. That is to get to a healthy relationship with another person, but more eternally, bigger picture, into a relationship with God, right? Our relationships will be directional in that way. So I have 3 types of boundaries I focus on. And the third one's kind of just a more advanced version of the second one. But let's look at these 3 boundaries. I have 3 boundaries I like to talk about in relationships. If you don't have any boundaries of any type in your relationship, and you're in a relationship right now, you should probably think about setting some. And I'll talk about that near the end. Keep in mind that while this is really applicable to dating relationships, like this is kind of where I wrote this material was for dating relationships, this stuff applies anywhere. In your friendships, there are boundaries, and you can set healthy boundaries in your friendships, right? You're a person, and so is that other person, and you both need to. So let's just get right into the first boundary, because it seems like this front row needs it. Okay. These boundaries are useful even in your friendship. So if you're not dating someone, that's okay. Boundaries are helpful in your friendships. They're helpful in your family relationships. If you have a really unhealthy relationship with your siblings, sometimes having good boundaries set up can help you. Now, these boundaries are pretty specific to dating, but there's a place for putting boundaries in a variety of places in your relationships in your life. Let's get into these ones. The first boundary I have on the board, which isn't super visible, I guess. Sorry about that. The board's kind of...
It's invisible on this thing.
Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't need to be
Just
visible.
kidding, you can see it.
Oh, okay, cool. The board only has like 4 words on it. It doesn't really matter. I was thinking I might need to write stuff on it if there's questions, but we'll just leave it for now. The first boundary is the physical boundary. This is obviously this seems to me like the most obvious conversation of boundaries when we talk about dating, right? You gotta have those physical boundaries. So in dating, I talked about it last week, there's a ton of pressure to be physical. In our society today, dating is viewed as a means to a sexual relationship. It's not about necessarily a deeper emotional relationship. It's not necessarily a means towards marriage. What it is in our culture today is that dating is how you have sex. Okay, you start at dating, and then you get to have your sexual relationship. And even that's starting to turn away from that, where our culture is just like hookups, right? You just hook up with people and whatever, you figure it out. Because that doesn't leave you as an emotional wreck and a husk later on in life. Well, don't do it. So, obviously there's a ton of pressure to be physical in your dating relationships, especially as young people. Most of us have a worldview of dating that is incredibly sexual, but there's a problem with that. It's a big problem. If you don't set healthy boundaries in your relationship, you could end up doing stuff in your dating relationships that you really will regret later on. Because once you give up your virginity, you can never get it back. It's gone. And that's something that's supposed to be special. That's shared just between you and the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, your spouse. And if you give that up while you're in high school as a teenager, there's a good chance, really good chance, you will not still have your virginity to give to your spouse. Your body and your sexuality can be an incredibly special thing to share with your future spouse, and it needs to be protected. I have a lot of regrets in this area. Now, I did not give up my virginity before marrying my wife, but I was very physical in a number of my relationships when I was in your guys' age. Grade 11, grade 12 is when I did most of my dating. And I was very physical. And it still hurts me to this day that I allowed myself to have such an intimate level of relationship with so many other women. That really the only woman I wanted that kind of relationship with is my wife. To this day, I still regret the fact that I had so many physical relationships when I was your guys' age. It's sad for me because I wish that it was only my wife and I who had ever experienced any kind of physical closeness like that, to that degree. I'm not talking about hugging or kissing. I mean even kissing. I'm not one of those wait to kiss till you're married. My kids are right now, which is great. Loving that. My kids are like, they were watching a show, some cartoon the other day, and the two of the characters that were like the main characters, they kiss. And they're like, what are they doing? And I'm like, they're kissing. They're like, but they're not married. And I'm like, right, don't ever change your minds on that. But yeah, that's a dad's dream. It's like, yay, my daughters think kissing is gross with other boys. They kiss dad on the cheek. Anyways, Olivia the other day, she went to go kiss me on the cheek and she got a lot of beard. And she's like, I don't think I want to kiss you anymore. It was pretty cute. Anyways. To this day, I still wish that only my wife and I could have experienced that level of intimacy. And for her, fortunately, she did protect herself in that way. I didn't. So, yeah, anyways. We need good physical boundaries. Because right now, the relationship you're in right this minute may not be the one that lasts forever. So we want to set good boundaries. Until your relationship ends, with either marriage or breakup, you just can't know. So we set good boundaries so that however that ending goes, it goes well. So you need to set good physical boundaries. At the beginning of your relationship, you should have very strict physical boundaries. You don't really know the other person. You don't know where this relationship is going. Set strict physical boundaries. Be smart about it. As your relationship grows, you can start to advance in some areas of physical connection, but I would really recommend limiting it. Hand-holding, hugs goodbye, hugs when you see each other. You don't need more than that while you're dating, honestly. I understand some people do more than others, but I'm telling you, your dating relationship, don't make it about the physical. You make it about the physical, you're going to miss everything else that's valuable in that relationship. One of my examples of the kind of couple you don't want to become. So I'm going to talk about a few different types of couples that you could become if you don't have good boundaries. And if you don't have a good physical boundary, you become what I call the pretzel couple. Okay? The human pretzel couple. This is the couple that's always intertwined. You know what I mean. I don't know if this happens in your school. When I was in high school, you could walk down the hallway and there was almost always at least one couple, but usually more, who would be sitting in the hall together having their lunch, legs wrapped over each other, or one sitting in the other's lap, or like one is like, their arm is like through the other one's arm, and then like they're somehow trying to eat with the other one's arm through, and they look like a human pretzel. It was crazy to me. I had a girlfriend once that she was reasonably physical, and I thought she would be, and I'd always seen those people in the hallway, and I thought that would be kind of cool. Maybe I could be one of those kind of people. So we sat one day for lunch, and I put my leg over hers, and so then she put her arm through my arm, and then I was like trying to eat my sandwich. I'm like, this is stupid. So I stopped that, but very inconvenient. But seriously, if we don't have any physical boundaries, you end up becoming the human pretzel couple. And if that's what you're like in public, I fear for what it looks like in private. Guys, set good physical boundaries. A dating relationship especially is not about the physical at all, really. Because the physical won't really matter. It'll figure itself out if the emotional is there, if you have a depth of understanding of each other, and if you're both pursuing Christ together. The physical will figure itself out in the right time. Okay, I know that can be an awkward topic for some people. Let's move on to the next one. The second type of boundary that I like to talk about, that's really, really important. We're going to spend a fair chunk of time here.
Knee slapper.
It's the time boundary.
Wait a minute.
Okay. So the time boundary. The time boundary is an important one. See, because new relationships are really exciting. And dating relationships are really exciting. And the most exciting thing is I just want to spend all my time with that other person. So now I'm married, so I don't have that kind of excitement anymore. But I get excited like that about video games. So sometimes I'll get a new video game and I'm like, this game is awesome. And then I want to spend all my time playing it. And I will. Like when I get into a new game that I'm really into, every spare moment I'll catch myself playing it. I'll plan my day around finding opportunities to play. I'll play a ton. Like Valheim was the most recent one I did this with. I got really into Valheim. I had a group of friends. We got a server so I can log on anytime into our shared world and could play. And I was like planning my work week around it. I'm like, okay, well if I go to the church for like my 4 hours, prep my youth talk, I could probably do a lunch hour and play all of lunch hour with Valheim, and then I could jump back into finishing my prep, and then I could do another 2 hours before the youth show up for the, and like I had planned out my day where it was all, and I just wouldn't even go home because I don't have internet at home, so I'd play here. So I'd spend my whole day here playing Valheim instead of going home and having dinner with my family. It was really unhealthy. I got so excited about this new game, all of my focus went into the game. All of my time, my energy, and I distanced myself from all the other relationships in my life. I mean, that happens with dating couples all the time. I don't really have it. Yeah, I guess I do. The never separate couple is what I call this couple. The never separate. This is the couple that spends all of their time together all the time. They drive to school together. If they don't drive to school together, one is like waiting outside for the other one to show up so they can walk into the school together. They're constantly together. You know that if one is there, the other's going to be there. You know that if one of them shows up at youth, they'll both be at youth. But if one of them is not coming to youth, you know neither of them will be there. They're the always together couple. They never, ever separate. As a result, neither of them hang out with their friend groups anymore. They're always together. They've abandoned their friend groups and gone to spend all their time just with each other. When they're not together physically, they're texting like crazy. Always texting each other, always in contact with each other. Never separate. You know any couples like that? Seen some couples like that? Maybe lost a friend or two to a relationship like that? Yeah. Maybe you've been the friend who's lost your friend group because of that. It's hard coming back to your friend group after you've abandoned them for 2 months for a girl that you were dating or a guy that you were dating, and then you come back to them and like, you've been gone for 2 months. Wait, we're not important to you anymore? It's a big problem. We get excited about our new relationship and we focus entirely on it, but that's not healthy. We have other relationships in our lives other than our girlfriends or our boyfriends. We have relationships with our family, right? We have a relationship with God, which we're going to talk about in a moment. We have a relationship with our family. We have a relationship with our other friends. And we have a relationship with ourselves. And we have a relationship with our significant other person, girlfriend or boyfriend, sometimes. We need to make time for all of our relationships. When you get into a dating relationship, the temptation is to just put all of your time and energy into that one relationship. It's a big mistake. Imagine that relationship ends with a breakup. You're heartbroken. You're destroyed. You want to go and turn to your friend group who's always been there for you, but you totally ditched them 2-3 months ago, and you haven't even talked to them at all because you've been so focused on another relationship. Are those friends still going to be there waiting for you? They might be, but it's going to hurt. They're going to be hurt because you broke their hearts a little bit because you ditched them. Let's say the dating relationship ends in marriage. Okay, best case scenario, ideal scenario, it ends in marriage. Okay, so you're getting married. So that means maybe you've been dating for at least a year. You've probably been engaged for a couple of months. Okay? P.S. My ideal timeline, if you're an adult going into a relationship, is you do 1 year dating, 6 months tops engagement. You should be married in a year and a half. If you take longer than that, you're setting yourself up for lustful sin. Okay, so not necessarily like that's a general guideline. It's not like a rules guideline. Anyways,
To the day.
so let's say you've been dating for about a year, engaged for a couple of months, and the whole time you've been the never separate couple. You have made your whole time, all your spare time has been spent together. Or spent focused on each other. Who are you going to ask to come stand at your wedding as your best man or your maid of honor? Who's going to come in attendance? You abandoned your friend groups. Is your family going to be supportive? You abandoned your family. You see, the time boundary, if we don't have any boundaries around how we spend our time in relationship, we set ourselves up. We set ourselves up for a very painful experience where we don't have other meaningful relationships in our lives. One human being cannot meet all of our relational needs. In fact, no human being can meet all of your relational needs. The only way in which your relational needs can ever be met is in a relationship with Jesus Christ. And then, through community with others who are also in a relationship with Jesus Christ, we meet other relational needs. But the only one who can truly fulfill our needs in relationship is Jesus, not a person, and especially not one person. If you're looking to a person, a girlfriend or a boyfriend, to meet all of your relational needs or even any of your relational needs, I would call that dangerous. That's a risky relationship. You need to assess your priorities and your purpose. Because actually in dating relationships, the goal, this is a little off topic, but the goal is to serve the other. To provide care to the other. And both should be serving one another in pursuit of their relationship with Jesus. So if you're in the relationship to fulfill your emptiness or your wants or desires, your lusts, if you're in a relationship to fill some empty place in your own heart, and you're looking to that other person to do it, you will be sadly disappointed and greatly hurt by it. And you'll probably hurt them in the process. Because the only one who can fill our relational need in our lives is Jesus. It's the only one. Other people have a part to play in that, but only Jesus is capable of doing it fully. So we need to set good boundaries around time. Set boundaries around how much time we spend together with a person we're dating. I usually recommend to young couples, your guys' age, to set a specific day on which you go for a date. I usually recommend 1 or 2 a month at high school level dating. You're going to see each other during the school day. You're going to see each other off and on throughout your week. But set maybe 1 to 2 a month. So that's 1 every other week. Okay? On a specific date. This is the day we're going out for a date. Maybe you take turns planning it. Take turns paying for it. It doesn't matter. You can negotiate all of that. But you set specific date times. This is when we're going to go on a date. That's the time where we set aside for just each other. That's a good thing. But in the same way, you also need to protect your other relationships. Hey, Tuesdays, that's my time. I'm hanging out with the guys. So I'm not going to be available for date night on a Tuesday because I'm hanging out with the guys on Tuesdays. Maybe every week, Tuesday is your set day where you're hanging out with the guys. I have set days like that. Like Saturday night is game night at my house with a couple of friends. And we do that every Saturday. That's game night. It's set aside. I have that planned in my week every week. So when Kathleen and I want to go on a date, we don't plan to date on Saturday nights. Because Saturday's a night where we have friends over at our house. We usually go on our dates Mondays while the kids are at school. It's the best. Okay? Although that has to change now. She has a new job. When are we going to go?
Oh no.
We'll find a time.
Saturday is no longer for the boys.
Yeah. Sometime after hunting season, because right now all my time is in hunting. But set aside a date time. But then at the same time, protect your other relationships. No, I've got small group night on a Friday or something. Or, Friday's youth night. We don't go out on Fridays. Youth night is Fridays. Right? I don't go out on Monday evening because Monday evening is family time. Or maybe Sunday evening is family dinner and game time. I won't date on those nights. There's no option for that. You communicate that. This is called setting up a boundary requires a conversation. You talk with the other person in the relationship and you set that up together. Right? So you actually plan this out. And I would add into this a very important boundary that's usually overlooked in our day and age is cell phone use. If you're scheduling Sunday night as family dinner and family time, don't be on your phone texting with your girlfriend or boyfriend the whole time. Because then you're not there with your family. You're there in body, but not in mind or spirit or anything else. You're totally absent. So it completely defeats the purpose. When you're in that family time, don't be on your cell phone with your girlfriend or your boyfriend. If they text you and you've got your phone on you and you check it, send a text back. Hey, it's family night. I'll text you back in like 5 hours. Completely reasonable.
Agreed. 5 hours? I like it.
If they're not okay with that, if the other person's like, you can't do that. You can't not talk to me for 5 hours. That is a problem. That is an unset time boundary that needs to be established. If you're not willing to establish it, or if they're not willing to establish it, that's an unhealthy relationship that probably shouldn't continue for very long. Or at all. Yeah, I think harsh is okay. Probably shouldn't continue. Because that person's being controlling and difficult. Okay? Unless it's an emergency, in which case they should text with big, huge letters, emergency. Then you can actually take it as an emergency. But otherwise, set a time, right? Like if, for example, off the example is Sunday night is family night, okay? You guys are in high school, which means you're going to see each other Monday at school. Yeah, you're not dating, but you're going to see each other. You can talk briefly. So, sorry, Sunday night's family night, remember? I'll see you in the morning. That's it. Don't text them the rest of the evening. They shouldn't text you the rest of the evening. You'll see each other tomorrow. It'll be okay. You'll survive a night without texting constantly. Okay? Same thing if you have a friend group time that you're hanging out with your friends. Okay? Hey, our small group is getting together. We're going to play Settlers of Catan. Don't be on your phone the whole time texting with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, because then you're not present with your group. Is this making sense to you guys? This is really practical dating advice right now that I'm giving you. Really practical stuff. But it matters. We need good boundaries around time. The time you invest into your relationship with your family and your friends matters, and it will probably last longer than your current dating relationship. Probably. Statistically speaking, most of your dating relationships that any of you are in right now will probably not last to marriage. They will likely break up. Not always. There's a chance. I'm just giving you the harsh stats, okay? I'll throw in a couple other stats here really quick. This is again off topic, but I love it. A couple other quick stats. If you have sex in your dating relationship, you're more likely to break up than you are to get married. If you have sex before marriage and then marry that person, you're more likely to divorce. Okay? If you live together before marriage, you're 40% more likely to divorce. And if you had premarital sex and lived together, you're like 60% more likely to divorce, something like that. The number's crazy high. If you're on a second marriage, so if you get divorced early on in life and you get a second marriage, your increase, so you take whatever other statistics that factor into your chance of divorce and you increase it by 20% more on a second marriage. Okay, so just being really clear here that statistically relationships are not in good shape right now in our world, and statistically relationships for you guys are not in good shape if you're not putting up good boundaries. And dating relationships in high school generally don't last. Generally. Right? And maybe I'm just speaking out of my own experience where I had 14 relationships in high school over the course of a year. Yeah, it wasn't good. It was not good.
Wait,
some of them weren't really relationships. Some of them just lasted like a weekend or so. But anyways, wasn't super good. So setting up these time boundaries is important. Because the reality is most of your dating relationships won't last. So your friendships matter. And your family matters. So one of my relationships when I was in high school was an incredibly unhealthy relationship. It was one where I actually hurt my friendships as well. Partially around the time boundary, partially because I was just being a jerk. I got pretty good at picking up girls because I'd been a loser most of my life. And in grade 11, 12, I kind of finally figured out a little bit of my own confidence and discovered that that was a really effective way to pick up girls. And I did some really cruel things. Like at grad, I stole one guy's date. because he was kind of the guy who nobody liked, and I stole his date because I thought that'd be funny. I successfully stole her away. That was not okay, and it was very wrong. But this other relationship, my friend was interested in this girl, and I asked her out first. And I wasn't even all that interested. It was more of a competition thing, and I just won, which was a problem. I ended up dating her for about 5 months. Now, while we were dating her, my friend and I were in a band together. We had a little garage band. 3 of us played music together. And I ended up breaking up the band over this relationship. I ended up choosing her over my friends that I had been in a band with, garage band with, for like 3 years. And then I ended up breaking up with her too, because of the pain of breaking up the band, and I blamed her for it. It was a whole mess. And I was kind of a messed up kid. Kind of, grade 11, 12. I was kind of messed up relationally. But guys, I didn't set good boundaries around my time, around my friendships, around my family. I chose this girl instead, and it wasn't a lasting or even healthy relationship. So all of that's to say, we need good time boundaries. Time boundaries are there to protect our families and our friendship relationships. Okay? Now there's a special kind of relationship that I give its own special boundary type to. And that's the spiritual boundaries. This is our last one, then we're done. The spiritual boundary is a type of time boundary that's completely focused on God. Because our primary relationship, I got asked this earlier tonight, what's the sort of hierarchy of relationships? They're like, what's the most important relationships? Like, how do they line up? And I said, okay, well, that's a good question. Here's where I think they should be, right? Number 1 is God. Number 2 is your immediate family. Number 3 is your friendships. And as a subset of friendships is your dating relationships. Okay, it's a subset. It's part of your friendships. And then under that would be things like sort of outer friend circle, if you have that, like an acquaintances kind of thing. Co-workers would come in under there somewhere down lower on the hierarchy. I guess actually above co-workers might be extended family. Depends on your relationship with your extended family. For mine's probably. So your hierarchy of relationships, though, let's focus on those top 3. It's God first, right? Number 1 is God. Number 2 is your immediate family. Number 3 is your friendships. And your dating relationship should start kind of below your other friendships as priority. And then over time it grows until it's kind of equal with your other friendships. And then it might eventually surpass it. Maybe that's your engagement stage. And then that relationship theoretically either ends, hopefully before you get to the engagement stage, because you've figured things out by then, or it ends in marriage, in which case then it moves its way up ahead of even a family, because an immediate family becomes your spouse rather than your parents. Okay, so that shifts. So dating relationships are a moving part of your priorities. But number 1 is always God. Always. Should be. Which means you need boundaries around your faith and your relationship with Jesus inside your dating relationship. Because in a dating relationship, there's the risk that you get pulled so into it that you completely lose sight of the bigger picture of Jesus, of the eternal, of the kingdom. That you take your eyes off the kingdom to focus on this other person and you miss it. And so we need good boundaries there to protect us from going that direction. So, it's a type of time boundaries in that it's about setting aside specific time. For example, you might say, as you enter into a dating relationship, you might look at your other person in this relationship, and you'd say, okay, so we need to set up some boundaries around how we use our time. And hopefully they're like, yeah, I agree. Let's make sure we're doing this well. Cool. You're on the same page. You go, okay, first of all, Friday nights, Sunday mornings, those are no-go times. Those are no dating times. Those are that's youth group, that's church. Those are top priorities for me. Also, first thing in the morning at 7 a.m. or whatever, that's when I read my Bible, my devotionals. So don't text me until like 8, kind of a thing, right? As an example. Set your time boundary around your relationship with Jesus. Make sure you're not neglecting that. Now, this is a hard boundary to set. Now, I've set it there in terms of very simple, practical ideas around time. But spirituality or faith, your belief in Jesus, is something of the heart. It's something sort of internal and ingrained in us. It's not just what we do. It's the character by which we live. It's the truth that drives our lives. And so we need to make sure that you're doing regular heart checks. That you're checking on yourself. Am I still pursuing Jesus with my life, or have I begun to pursue the other person in my life with my life? Have I taken my eyes off the kingdom for the sake of this person? The people are valuable. God has designed us to be in relationship with people. But we're to do that in relationship first with Him. Do heart checks. Am I looking to this person to meet my need for fill in the blank? Should I be looking to Jesus instead? The answer is yes. You should be looking to Jesus instead to fill that need. The spiritual boundary is about bringing our eyes and keeping our eyes on Jesus. Have I set aside time for regular Bible and devotional and prayer? Am I neglecting church, or am I still attending? Am I still living out my faith every day? And then there's one more part of the spiritual boundary. So that's the spiritual boundary in terms of both you need to discuss how are we setting aside time to make sure we're pursuing Jesus. Now there's one more part. The spiritual boundary is about supporting one another in your pursuit of Jesus. The person you're dating, or even the person that you're married to one day, like the person I'm married to, my wife, and even my own children, none of them are mine. They're God's. They belong to God. They're His children first. God calls them His children. He calls me His child. We belong to Jesus. We're His people. He saved us from slavery to sin and made us slaves to Him instead, if we so choose. And so we don't belong to the other person. And so my role as my wife's husband is not to hold on to her and never let her go. She's mine. No, my goal is to prepare her to be in the presence of God. My goal is to walk with her in her life, to support her decisions so that she can be the person that God has called her to be and stand in His presence. And I can be proud of the fact that I can say, here she is, beautiful, beautiful bride of Christ. And she can say the same of me. That's the goal. That's the point of the relationship. It's not for me to have this person who's going to meet my needs and who I own and control and have say over. But it's for me to be able to serve her in such a way that she can enter into God's kingdom in an awesome way. There's actually a really good example of this that just happened really recently in my life, in my marriage. Monday is my day off. Monday is my day off. I also take Saturday off, so I get 2 days a week off. But Saturdays are more flexible. So they're my day off, but I kind of do more flexible stuff if I'm needed for something for the church before Sunday morning. But Monday, I guard my Mondays. Monday is my day off. I don't do stuff on Monday as long as I can avoid it. And part of that is that Monday night is game night. With a couple of my friends in BC, we get online on Discord, and we usually play games together. Once a week, Monday night, that's game night. Now, the internet at my house sucks. So for the past 2 years, I've been coming to the church on Monday nights in my office using the better internet that's here and playing a game with my friends from BC once a week in my Monday nights. It's been a really valuable and important part of my schedule, a really important part of my life. It's refreshing. It allows me to have a group of friends that aren't engaged here at the church, so they don't draw me into any church stuff. They don't draw me into any work. They just let me just kind of hang out with them, which is great. And they're my friends, so I'm maintaining those friendships that are really valuable to me in BC, which is where I'm from, for those who didn't know that. I'm from BC. Go Canucks.
Funny.
Funny joke.
Okay. So that's a really, really valuable time in my week. And I usually protect it pretty strongly. However, recently a Bible study group started meeting Monday nights. And my wife really wanted to go. Now we have children, young children. They can't be left at home alone yet. So one of us has to be with the children. And because her Bible study is in the evening, and my game is in the evening, and the kids need to go to bed since it's a school night, one of us has got to be home. And so, without even hesitation, that's not true. Yeah, no, I didn't hesitate. But internally, I'm like, no! But I did not hesitate, and I said, yeah, of course you should go to the Bible study. In fact, you should go. I want you to go. You need to go. Because you need to connect with other people who are studying God's Word. You need to be part of that. You need to dig into these other books. You need to involve these things. Like, I lead Bible studies for people because I think they're valuable. Well, there's a Bible study happening. It's valuable. You should go. And so I sent my wife and I sacrificed my game night. Now, fortunately, I managed to get my internet working just well enough to use Discord. I can't play video games, but I can talk with my friends on Monday nights. So we tend to do that. And we play Pathfinder. So that's fun, which is mostly talking. So that's great. So I still get to enjoy my game night Monday night, though it's a little bit less graphically engaging because I don't really get to go online and see all the pictures and everything else in video gaming. But I still get to hang out with my friends, and my wife is able to go to Bible study. But even if I couldn't have hung out with my friends, I still would have sent my wife to the Bible study. Because the Bible study has value for my wife's salvation, for her faith, for her spiritual life. It's important. And the primary role of our marriage is that she grow closer to God, not necessarily closer to me. But if we're both growing closer to God, then we will grow closer to each other. Okay. So the role of the spiritual boundary is not just to protect your own faith, but to actually enter into a place of serving the other in their pursuit of their relationship with Jesus. Okay? You're to be their biggest cheerleader as they run towards Christ. All right. Boundaries are about protecting relationship. They're about setting up relationships to succeed during their lifespan and to end well when they end. That's the point of boundaries. Every relationship needs good boundaries. If you're in a dating relationship and you have no boundaries, I'd highly recommend you set up a boundaries discussion. Talk to the person you're dating and say, hey, I think we should talk about our boundaries. One of my favorite stories about boundaries, I got permission to share this story. You guys might remember Robin as one of our youth leaders a couple years ago. So she shared with me a story, and I think she gave me permission to share this story. I think it's really awesome. She got asked out by this guy, or this guy showed interest in her, and it kind of freaked her out. She was kind of excited, but kind of nervous. So she spent an evening thinking about it before saying yes to him, and decided to start writing down her boundaries. And she ended up with this notebook of I don't even know, a dozen pages or more, of boundaries that she has for the relationship. And then she goes to this guy's house, she knocks on his door. He's living at college, he's got a bunch of roommates. She knocks on his door, he opens his door, and she goes, okay, if we're going to date, these are my boundaries. And then she's like, I'm just going to read this all to you. She just made him sit down and listen to her as she read off her boundaries. It's pretty extreme, but it's really good. Okay? It sets up the relationship to be healthier from the get-go. And then if it does break up, you break up without deep regrets because you set up good boundaries. And if it does make it to marriage, you make it there feeling proud of the fact that you did it with good boundaries. That you did it well. That you pursued Christ throughout the whole thing. And that you didn't give up any of your morals or your principles or your values. So if you're already in a relationship and you haven't set up boundaries, you guys need to have a conversation about boundaries. What's appropriate? What's inappropriate? Where are your values? What's okay right now? What's not okay? How are we spending our time? And are we pursuing Jesus first? Have a boundaries discussion, set them up, and then protect them. Enforce them. Back each other up and make it work. Relationships are exactly what God has made us for. Relationship with one another, and with Him, with ourselves. We're designed for relationship. But our relationships are broken. They're damaged. Shalom was lost in Genesis chapter 3. So when we enter into relationships, we can't just assume that it's going to work out perfectly and naturally every time. Because our natural direction is going to be sin. It's going to be brokenness. Boundaries are just one practical way in which you can set up your relationship to succeed. So I'd encourage you guys to think carefully about boundaries in your relationships. Let's pray, and then you can go to your small groups. Lord God, we thank you that you have called us into relationship, that you desire for us to experience meaningful relationship with you and with others. Lord, I pray that you would give us wisdom. Ultimately, boundaries and any relationship comes down to wisdom. And Lord, many of us are just so unwise, and we learn our wisdom by making tons of mistakes. That's how I learned. Lord, I pray that you would start to give these young people wisdom before too many mistakes are made. And Lord, give them the humility that when mistakes are made, that they would learn from those and grow more close to you and grow in great wisdom. We pray that you be with them this week. In your name, Lord.